Welcome to Kinky Knots Cafe, Proactive is the Way, where we provide you tools and resources to enhance your mind, body, and spirit. Get ready, folks. Let us nurture you from the inside out.
Hello, my friends. Thank you for joining me today. Can you believe how fast this summer has flown by? I thought money was fleeting. Hell, life is fleeting. This summer, I decided to keep it chill as we are finally moving back into our home. And after returning from a 3-week trip overseas, I felt that it was so important to focus on the continued healing of my mind, body, and spirit, and conserve as much energy as possible. Such a necessity. How has your summer been? I would love to recount your experience and live vicariously through you. Maybe get some ideas for next summer or a mini retreat during the school season. Drop me a line or two in the comments or contact me at www.kinkyknotscafe.com/contact us. All right, let's get into it. Today, we are closing out the last 5 chapters of The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. Robert, where were you in 2015 when I decided to return to the U.S. and attempt this single mom life raising my 3 kids solo? Oh my God. Had I thought like some of these characters in which you portrayed within your book, I think I would not have experienced this emotional roller coaster I endured while attempting to navigate absolute crazy. Although I ended the first round successfully, should it occur again, and not that I am willing it, I want to thank you for equipping me with the knowledge of human nature, how to better recognize the behavior, and the steps to take to properly identify these behaviors within myself and either restrain from its development or leverage it in a positive manner, and protect myself and advise my children how to protect themselves. As I shared in my last podcast with Sherban Made, outside of what I see in movies, I didn't think that there was such a plethora of people who exist merely for their own self-interest and gratification. After reading your book, the fact that you had to write about these behaviors and provide us guidance inferred to me that these behaviors are proliferating within our society, and that even within the best of us, no matter how much we attempt to purport goodness, we need to have a level of awareness to become better stewards within life. So truly, thank you. I can't wait until my next read by you. Yes, folks, coming soon, we will be reading the 48 Laws of Power. It doesn't fit in my theme for next season, but hopefully I will figure out how to incorporate this into Proactive is the Way. So stay tuned. Chapter 14, The Law of Conformity. Have you ever recognized how much you conform under the demands of society? Robert opens this chapter by sharing that in the group setting, we unconsciously imitate what others are saying and doing. We think differently, more concerned with fitting in and believing what others believe. We feel different emotions, which are infected by the mood of the group. We are more prone to taking risks, to acting irrationally, because why not? Everyone else is. This social personality can come to dominate who we are, listening so much to others and conforming our behavior to them. We slowly lose a sense of our uniqueness and the ability to think for ourselves. The only solution is to develop self-awareness and a superior understanding of the changes that occur in us when we are in groups. Robert shares the story of a young boy growing up in communist China and the Great Socialist Cultural Revolution, which occurred, and how the students within his school were forced into groupthink to protect themselves from being tormented and imprisoned for being a revisionist, an agent for those who secretly worked to pull China back into its past. In this chapter, we learn how oftentimes we have a desire to be a part of something, to fit in adopting ideas, beliefs, and values, or as a form of protection, we feel that it is necessary to associate or conjoin forces with those who will fulfill that desire. And because of that deep desire, we get so caught up emotionally. Our thought processes becomes simplistic, and we don't possess the ability for true independent thought, developing the ability to detach ourselves from the group and create some mental space for true independent thinking, and tend to accept the reality of the powerful effect that the group has on us. When we encounter a situation or a question is posed that may challenge group thought, we fail to ask ourselves pertinent questions to assess as to whether the beliefs and emotions in which we experience are our own or that of the group. When people are free to do as they please, Eric Hoffer states, they usually imitate each other. So, how do we overcome? Robert shares that we must observe our tendency to demonize the enemy and control it. We must train ourselves to not blindly venerate our leaders. We respect them for their accomplishments without feeling the need to deify them. We must be especially careful around those who have charismatic appeal and try to demystify and pull them down to earth. With such awareness, we can begin to resist and detach. Robert goes further into depth, breaking down individual and group dynamics in governmental or monarchies and the different types of authority figures that exist within these spaces, their behavioral tendencies, and how they exacerbate or support group dynamics to either lead the group successfully or to its demise. In the next chapter, chapter 15, the law of fickleness, or I would say, the law of watch your own damn back. People are fickle. They are quick to turn on you in a moment you seem weak, inexperienced, or encounter a setback. When you encounter such an environment, it will be your job to help them better understand you, to gain their loyalty and trust. Make them want to follow you. As a leader, authority is the delicate art of creating the appearance of power legitimacy, and fairness while getting people to identify with you as a leader who is in their service. Once you have gained people's trust, they will stand by you as their leader, no matter the bad circumstances. I love the story Robert used to help us better understand. It was about Queen Elizabeth Tudor. Now, this was a true queen playing the most ruthless game with such style and grace. 'Cause girls are players too. The story about Queen Elizabeth Tudor was so captivating. Get the book, folks, and read about her. She was so gifted at building effective relationships and strategizing during war. And although it was not shared, I know she had the gift of foresight. She appeared to always be years ahead of her constituents and enemies, leveraging her gifts well to build a prosperous and well-protected kingdom. What I liked about her is that she didn't leverage her entitlement expecting loyalty. She worked for it. She would earn the trust and credibility she required through her actions. On top of that, she remained humble and was a servant leader who possessed the ability to overcome people's fickleness and channel their energies for the prosperity of the kingdom. In this chapter, Robert guides us through developing strategies for establishing authorities, such as finding your authority style, to cultivating the third eye. In chapter 16, the law of aggression. Be mindful of the different types of aggressors that exist within the world. As my sister says, the earth disturbers, manipulators, intimidators, the power seekers. In this chapter, you will learn about the controlled and passive aggressors and even how to tame your own aggressive energies for productive purposes. So let me reiterate. The stories alone will teach you all that you need to know. In this next story about Rockefeller, Clark, and Payne, although I wanted to side with the underdog, I couldn't help but admire how Rockefeller leveraged his sophisticated passive aggressiveness to corner the refinery oil market. I felt bad for those who succumbed to his wrath, but then I didn't. He was very strategic and just possessed better tactics and resources. Not in a brute and cunning way, but it was like playing a game of chess, and you lost because he was more knowledgeable and strategically gifted. In this instance, I couldn't help but think, don't hate the player, hate the game. In this chapter, you will learn about the sophisticated and primitive aggressor and how to identify each type. The reality is that we all possess aggression. And I will admit that in the past, I had a lot of pent-up aggression and used it passively to stop people from trying to run game on me. Always using my kindness as weakness. Who here has fallen victim to this? Now, as I have been growing stronger in my disposition and setting standards that I actually abide by, I have learned to assert my desires and set boundaries. And in doing so, my life has eased and placed my mental and emotional health on a positive trajectory for proper healing and stability. As we continue, you will learn about the source of human aggression, the differences between passive aggression, controlled aggression, and its strategies, and how to counter them. In chapter 17, seize the historical moment, the law of generational myopia. You will learn about how your generation cultivates your values and belief system and the steps you can take to free your mind from the mental constraints placed on you by your generation. The chapter kicks off with a story in which the French monarchy leaned on its laurels and refused to hear its calls and pleas from its constituents to reform. Well, I am sure you can predict the outcome of that mindset. Yes, folks, the French Revolution ensued. In the end, as you know, those who fail to adhere to the calls of reform, those who resist evolving, will inevitably die. Why? Because each generation will encounter a new wave of young people who are always attempting to create something more reflective of the world in which they desire. One that reflects more of their values and the spirit, and oftentimes goes in a completely different direction of the previous generation. We see it occur time and time again, and even in different industries, from the fashion to the financial industry. It is our job to recognize the generational patterns. For example, we have been going through a revolutionary event of our own, after which subsequent generations of people will come to establish principles, conventions, and then hopefully stability. Robert gives us strategies to leverage these evolutionary times most effectively with the least amount of strife and conflict. One that I wish I understood a long time ago is this ideology about subversion. He shared, you might find yourself at odds with some part of the spirit of your generation or the times you live in. Perhaps you identify with some tradition in the past that has been superseded, or your values differ in some way because of your own individual temperament. Whatever the reason, it is never wise to preach or moralize or condemn the spirit of the times. You will only marginalize yourself. If the spirit of the times is like a tide or a stream, better to find a way to gently redirect it instead of fighting its direction. You will have more power and effect by working within the zeitgeist and subverting it. Like I said, I wish I had read this book back in 2015, right before my life turned upside down in 2016. I failed miserably in this area, but have since learned through the guidance of my spirit. It said, preserve yourself, Toya. Do not become a martyr, as the times have not changed too much. Instead of fighting the old, less, and forge your own path. As such, I will keep learning, developing, adapting, and growing. We close out this book with the law of death denial, meditating on our common mortality. If you are someone who struggles with thoughts of death, this chapter is golden. As Greene shares, our growing reasoning powers and knowledge of science have only made how we view and discuss death awkward. He shares that many of us can no longer believe in the concept of the afterlife with any conviction, but we are left with no compensations, with only the stark reality confronting us. We might try to put a brave face on this, to pretend we can accept this reality as adults, but we cannot erase our elemental fears so easily. In the course of a few hundred years of this change in our awareness, we cannot suddenly transform one of the deepest parts of our nature, our fear of death. And so, what we do instead of creating belief systems such as an afterlife is to rely on denial, repressing the awareness of death as much as possible. So, through our denial, we make it invisible. We create action movies to demystify dying or venerate the youth. Oh my God. Ageism is proliferating our culture. Or we leverage technological or medical advancements to look or feel younger, never really managing death in a healthy way. When we repress the thought of death, we stir up anxiety and continued illusions. It is interesting. I'm reading a book right now. It's about meditation, but it has a section in which it speaks about how we should understand death. It's titled The Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. And he shares that our way to overcome the fear of death is to understand that death and life are interdependent. We can't fully embrace one without understanding and accepting the other. If one doesn't know how to die, one can hardly know how to live. We have to learn to accept that death is a part of life and vice versa. We must look death in the face and accept it as we accept life. He suggests that we should leverage this idea of mindfulness by meditating on the corpse. Meditate, he says, on the decomposition of the body. How the body bloats and turns colors. How it is eaten by worms until only bits of blood and flesh still cling to the bones. Meditate up to the point where only white bones remain, which in turn are slowly worn away and turn into dust. Meditate like that, knowing that your own body will undergo the same process. We should meditate on the corpse until we are calm and at peace, until our mind and heart are light and tranquil, and a smile appears on your face. Thus, by overcoming revulsion and fear, life will be seen as infinitely precious, every second of it worth living. And it is not just our own lives that are recognized as precious, but the lives of every other person, every other being, every other reality. We can no longer be deluded by the notion that the destruction of others' lives is necessary for our own survival. We see that life and death are but two faces of life, and that without both, life is not possible. With this understanding, we can rise above life and death, and to know how to live and how to die. See reality as it is, and resist the temptation to establish an illusion to pacify our fears. Only then will we be able to create a calm and serene state, similar to all those who have obtained the way. Robert writes very similar thoughts, leveraging imagery and acceptance, and provides a thorough overview about the path that we can take to cut loose from all of the illusions and addictions we employ to numb our anxiety. Growing up, my father used to always tell us, don't be caught up in the illusion. Your heaven and hell is right here on earth. You can make your heaven or make your hell, but when your time is up, your time is up. He actually said it a bit more ruthless than that, but in the end, essentially, he was saying, make sure you live your life and your life was well lived. And you did so to the fullest. All right, folks, that's a wrap. To access all replays or learn more about Kinky Knots Cafe's Proactive is the Way, please visit www.kinkyknotscafe.com. Proactive is the way, my friends. Take good care.